Yeah. Grind to get a lot of dough and dirt through all the obstacles, cause anything is possible. Yeah. Oh man, I got a lot of goals. Stack that bread and vomit nose. Anything is possible.
Greetings, everybody. Here we are at Season 1, Episode 2 of the Equity Brothers with William Wilson and Josh Goodwin. How you doing, Josh?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm all right. Blessed, man. Blessed. We're here.
It's a good start to the week. Good to be back with you guys. Good to be with you in particular. So I know we ended last episode starting to dive a little further into real estate methods for making money and how to create that equity, how to get access to those funds in different modes. But we want to take today and really show you guys how to start making money or start building equity to start that generational wealth tomorrow. Like, how can you immediately get in the game? How can you get access to funds? How can you eliminate some of those pitfalls that people run into, but also the barriers that keep them either out of home ownership or scare them away from jumping in? So we'll get into that.
Yeah, let's get it.
Let's
jump into it.
As we talk about that, let's, William, kind of talk about home ownership just in general. Like, right. Why is that so important?
Okay.
Why is that? How does that help people build their generational wealth? And why is it how is it different than just renting?
Yeah, so I think initially when you start talking about the advantages of real estate, I can't remember. I think Warren Buffett said 90% of all millionaires did it via real estate or own a decent amount of real estate, which is true because even if you look at every facet of generational wealth, it's accumulated via land acquisition, property acquisition, real estate in some facet. So just taking the examples I've seen with my clients and then studying and doing my due diligence on the history of real estate, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. And then again, like I said, I didn't really jump in real estate till I was like 28 years old. So just seeing how important real estate is to financial health, generational wealth, it's a no-brainer. But one of the biggest barriers. So I wanted to speak to everybody today on how to do it, right? Like the genesis of it. And a lot of barriers and the barriers that come with real estate. So first barrier that I see with my people, and you tell me yours too, credit, a ton of people have credit problems. Credit, second would be money. They don't have a down payment. And third would just be the mindset and them feeling not worthy enough to own a home. What would be your top three for people?
So I can agree with all of those. I think it's not, and sometimes it's not the understanding of how to build credit.
Yeah.
It's the realization that they already did, and maybe in a negative way. So we've all seen the predatorial credit lenders and banks that are at colleges giving kids these credit cards.
They got me.
Yeah, like they give you a T-shirt and a water bottle, and then they give you $700 to go spend, and then you end up paying $10,000.
I used to buy all our pizzas. That was off a credit card I got at Belmont. Like I spent $300 in a weekend on Papa John's. My credit was tanked after that because I didn't even have a job to pay that $300 back. And it should be something in there where you say, look, I can't give this person a credit card if they don't have a job to repay it. I was in college.
Listen, I'm pretty sure that's outlawed at this point in time.
It should be.
There's a reason they got us on it, or they got you on it.
Got me tough.
I ate the pizzas. I did not purchase them or get credit cards, but that's one way.
Yeah.
There's several issues that you run into when you're trying to get a house. Now, down payment is one of those that people are scared of because everybody thinks you got to have 20%, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
You can go 10%, you can go 5% if you want to be conventional. If you want to move into a different type of loan, FHA loan, you can go as far as 3.5% down.
Correct.
And I think people lose sight of that when they start to compare that to rent, and they think I'm not doing that for rent. But a lot of times with rent, you're paying your first and last month plus a security deposit.
Yeah.
So that's very close, if not equal, to what you could get on a starter home or a townhome.
More.
Exactly. And you're not getting that money back, but when your down payment is putting money in your savings account, essentially through the equity that you're building. So I wouldn't disagree with any of those, but I think us being able to educate people on how they can either build those things up, avoid the negativity that goes with some of those, but really start investing in their own real estate today.
Correct.
So let's go a little further into home ownership. Not just the credit and the down payment and things like that you need, but also what should young buyers or first-time home buyers, what should they be looking for? What is a great way to get started in the game, and how do they start taking those first steps?
So I kind of wanted to touch on the credit a little bit more, the credit piece. So a lot of people don't understand this. When you start shopping for homes, mortgage lenders, they take your middle score. So you got Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. They take your middle score. A lot of people don't realize that because people are calling me like, hey, Credit Karma said I'm at a 700. But then when a mortgage lender pulls it, they're at like 660 or something. And they don't understand that because they're taking your middle score. So quick credit tips. Don't close credit cards if you have them open. The bureaus need to see length of history. After that is, don't worry if your score goes down a little bit when you're applying for cards. To build credit, you have to obtain credit. People don't understand that. They're like, sometimes I don't even want to apply for a mortgage because I'm scared that it's going to no. You have to apply for things to build your credit. So those are the barriers that I really want everybody to understand. Is one, lenders use your middle score. Don't be afraid to apply for credit. And keep your balances low, ideally under 10%. If you have a $500 limit, a balance on your card, don't use all $500 on that by the time it reports. And lastly, this is getting kind of deep, but look and see when your credit cards report to the bureau. So say if they reports on the 13th, use it. Just make sure you spend it or pay it back before it reports to the bureau on the 13th. And then next step, and these are just things I hear all the time with down payment. Check your states. Like in Tennessee, we got something called THDA. It's a down payment. But to get these, you got to have at least a 640 credit score. So credit is always efficient across the board. If you want down payment help, you have to have a good credit score. There are some other ones called Chinoa, THDA specifically for Tennessee, but credit revolves around getting quote unquote free, but it's not free. Your mortgage payment will be higher when you get these down payment options too, which is a lot of people don't realize that too. Some are even a second mortgage on them. So
and those are all great ways. And if you guys will follow us on social media, you'll see whether it's in the stories or it's in posts. We'll post further into the steps on how to check these different items. What to look for. Simple things like signing up for a gas card. And having it auto debit instead of paying for your gas every time you go. I mean, it's a really quick, easy way to help build that credit.
You put me up on the credit on the American Express Platinum.
Yeah, and so it's
crucial.
You pay it off right away, but you're building different points that you can use to have different experiences, pay for flights, things like that. I know one that we use is the Southwest Visa, just because we either fly so much or we put all of our expenses on that and just have it on auto pay at the end of the month, that we eventually get Companion Pass, which is just an easy way for us to fly, one of us to fly for free everywhere we go.
That's a good savings. Great savings.
So it saves us thousands of dollars on that, but it is the discipline of making sure it's paid. Now, you're going to run up $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 and not pay it. You're going to pay way over, and then it's going to hurt your credit.
Correct.
And then you're going backwards. So making sure that you stay on top of that discipline-wise. What any other barriers to starting the home ownership process?
Lastly, the third one would be worthiness, man. A lot of people don't even feel like they're worthy of it. Like, I mean, example of that, man, would be like generational. Like, say if like your grandmother's been renting, your parents are renting, you're naturally going to say, look, I'm going to rent too, because that's all you know. So just having a mindset to say, look, I want to explore a different trail. And what's that quote? Only takes one person, one risk taker in a family to create generational wealth for everybody else.
I watched that video this morning. Somebody's got to be the one.
Yeah,
somebody's got to be the one to change.
Has to be the one.
Change the cycle.
And like you gave an example in that last episode, you got to have your reason why. Right? What's your purpose? Why to be the one? But it's just mindset, man. I've seen bro, I'm gonna give you a quick example. I had a girl who had a place under contract in Clarksville. She probably would have moved in with maybe 35,000 equity. Like her family talked her out of that because they were so scared. They were projecting their fears onto her. She backed out of the contract, lost her earnest money, lost everything.
Wow.
It's still renting. But that was just her family unit was terrified for her decision. An incredibly qualified candidate to buy a home. Lost out on all that equity, lost her earnest money. And she's still renting to this day because her family was scared. She wasn't necessarily initially scared. Her husband, her aunt, and her cousin talked her out of buying a home. And I think a big piece of that too is something to overcome is if she would have done a due diligence, and I had many conversations with her, they told her I was lying to her.
Right.
But if she would have done the due diligence education on her own about home ownership and had that confidence in herself, she would have realized she was making one of the best decisions of her life. She probably would have had upwards of 50K equity today.
Well, and I think one issue we're dealing with, and this is nationwide, this is not Nashville or Tennessee specific, we are coming into a generation or a part of a generation where their family members experienced the 2008 crash. Mm-hmm. And, there was a lot of, horrible lending and things baked into that. So there's reasons that people are fearful.
Right.
But people were losing their home at a rapid rate at that point. And so
Correct.
Bad investment that had people going bankrupt with bad loans.
Right.
Educating them around why that happened and why that's not allowed to happen now. Mm-hmm. That's a big piece of it. So make sure that you are working with somebody that you trust. I think you can't encourage somebody enough to vet the people that they're using. Make sure that they can adequately explain to you why this is a good investment, because they're going to have people who went through negative experiences. And a lot of times those negative experiences are what stay in somebody's mind of, this might happen, or this negative thing could happen, or I might owe this much money, or what if the HVAC goes out, or, all those different things. But you have to do it. Once you do it once, you're going to start seeing, this is how you do it. Yeah. And both of us, it's not like somebody told us growing up, buy this house and then rent it out and then buy another one and rent it out and buy another one. Mm-hmm. And, using house hacking, which we'll get into a little bit further here in a second. But we just did it. Like we just bought a house, and then it was kind of the light bulb went off of, hey, I bought this house for $150,000, and then you go to sell it and like, it's worth $240,000.
Right. By
the way, you've been paying for the last couple of years, so here's a check for $100,000.
Right.
And then it was like, oh wow, like if I can make $100,000 every couple of years selling my house,
right?
Why wouldn't you do it over and over again?
Correct.
And so we'll talk a lot about how to understand where to buy, why Nashville in particular is such a hot market and a market that is poised to withstand a lot of the negativity and fear mongering that you're hearing amongst media. We're partial to it because we grew up here, we're from here, we work here, but we can explain to you the reasons why it's such a great place to be and what we continue to look for. So dive into house hacking, because I know that's how you started. You bought a property, house hacked it, and you've now done that a couple of times, and you've accumulated a portfolio. Talk about what house hacking is, how you got started, and how it's something easy just to keep doing.
Yeah, okay. So it's two variables to this. There's two sides. So I'm going to start with probably the most efficient side, I think. So real high level, if you buy an investment property, banks want you to put down 20% because of the risk. So with house hacking, essentially what you can do, start with the 3 steps I said earlier. Get your credit, obtain down payment, and get some confidence. Once you do that, hypothetically, let's say, actually, I'll use a real life example. Myself, right? You buy house 1. I bought my first house, $200,000, right? Live in that for a year, put a tenant in it. You can buy that house at 3.5% instead of putting down 20%. Live in that house for a year.
So just if you're keeping score at home, instead of buying an investment property, putting down 20% on a $200,000 home, that is $40,000 At 3.5%, you only have to come up with $7,000 plus some closing costs that can be baked in a different way. But you don't need $40,000
in this market. You can get closing right now from the seller. So yeah, correct. So first house we bought $200K, lived in it for a year, put a tenant in it, mortgage $1,100, tenant $1,600. Cash flowing that. So now you're building equity in two places. That same house right now is worth $350, and we're cash flowing substantially. Next house, do it again, real high level numbers, $300,000. That house today worth almost $500K. Mortgage $1,700, tenants $3,000 a month, and that's two properties. First property I put down 3.5%. Second property put down 5%. So 3.5% is FHA, right? Right. For everybody. 3.5% FHA, second property, and typically lenders will tell you can only have one FHA property. So after you put that 3.5 down, wrap that up. That's a wrap. Move forward, you go conventional route. So that's why when you start getting diligent to get a conventional loan, you got to be a better borrower. Your credit's got to be higher. Your DTI has to be more compact. So second house, conventional. Tenant in that, boom. Third house, and do the same thing.
And let me interject right here, because I know some people may be thinking, well, how on earth am I going to qualify to have a mortgage on 3 different houses?
Great question.
When you have the $1,600 rent on an $1,100 mortgage, right now banks will give you credit for 75% of the monthly rental as income.
Correct.
So $1,200 of that the bank is going to count as income, which is going to wipe out the $1,100 that you owe on the mortgage. So it's essentially you're showing an extra $100 profit.
Correct.
And no mortgage when you go to buy the second one. And as long as you continue to do that in a cash flow perspective, even if you're a little bit negative, if the mortgage was $1,500 and you got credit for $1,200, that's still only showing that you owe $300 a month. So, you're allowed up to a certain amount based on how much you're making to carry as a mortgage loan, as mortgage debt. And that's how it works. So yes, you can have up to I believe it's 9 Fannie and Freddie loans.
Yeah, before you got to throw them in the LLC. But also, all you need is a lease. Some lenders want security deposit, first month's rent, and a lease. But all I had to do was get a lease from my tenant, give that to my lender. Shout out to AJ, Arthur Blackburn. Give him my lease, and then that negates it off your DTI, which is debt to income. So that $200,000 and that $300,000 home, so that's $500,000. They don't even count that because now that's income producing properties. So they don't even count that on your debt anymore because now you're generating income and building equity. So when I realized this house hacking, right? Like you can acquire multiple homes for putting down, and again, it takes a little patience. It takes a plan. But if you execute that, that's why I always tell my young people, imagine a young person starting this game at 18 or even 20. You could feasibly start this at 50 and then by 60, acquire an incredible portfolio by being diligent and just purchasing homes annually, right? Next home, $400,000. Buy that, write off everything, tenant in that, $3,000. Mortgage, $2,200. And then do it again. And then this is really where it gets fun with investing because now you can pull equity out. And now I pull equity out. Go buy real investment properties where now I'm putting down maybe 15, 20, right? Purchase short-term rentals. So you have leverage to do that by house hacking. And it's like the best way that an average person can jump in the investment game without leveraging so much of their wealth.
With just a 9 to 5. I mean,
yes, everybody can do this.
You need somewhere to live. Mm-hmm. This is what we talked about in episode 1. You have to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to renting and essentially throwing away, let's say you rent for $1,000 a month. That $1,000, you're not investing in anything. You're just paying to live that month.
Right.
When you are paying a mortgage, a percentage of that mortgage is going against what you owe on the home. So that's how you're creating equity. So when you pay that down over years, when William started out and he had a house that he put $7,000 down on, he still owed $193. But every month, a portion of that $1,100 was going against that $193. So, as he kept it, Now he's building that equity. He said it's worth $350 now. He's probably, he probably owes maybe $100,000. So he's got $250,000 in equity that he built. And as long as you're pulling that equity out and you're not selling that and having to pay capital gains tax, well, as we get into different rental discussions, we'll talk about 1031 exchange and different things like that to avoid taxes and make sure that you're maximizing your money and your investment opportunities. Also want to talk, when we start talking about rentals, you'll see as you peruse the internet and you start to look for different things, you'll see LTR and STR. That's long-term rental, short-term rental. So just quickly, long-term rentals are typically things that are 6 months or more leases. Short-term rentals are, what we call verbos, Airbnbs, things like that. So those are just some different avenues that you can use. But this house hacking, another thing that neither one of us got the opportunity to do, but I would love to, especially younger investors, people who are in high school or in college, start your house hacking with a multifamily unit.
Great. I was going to touch on that.
Buy a quadplex, you're living in one, and you've got 3 rents. Now, you are just accelerating.
That's great. How
much equity you're building, how much money you're making, and it snowballs from there.
And you can get a quadruplex with an FHA loan. Your first loan can be 3.5%. You can buy a quadruplex with 3.5%, no 20%. Live in one, rent out 3, live for free, live in that for a year, rent out that 4th one, cash flow that whole property, and then go do it again. Like you can really sustain an incredible real estate portfolio if you start investing. Like you said earlier, when's the best time to buy real estate? Yesterday. Best time, second best time is now. But I like that. I like the concept of, with my younger people, saying like, look, man, you can get you upwards of, if you started like 20, by the time you're our age, you can have 20 doors. Slowly playing the game, right? That's how people retire. Like, you can sustain that and quit your 9 to 5 and retire. Here's a question too, a side note. How many doors, like from your investors that what's the max amount of doors that that somebody has?
Being in real estate long enough, you meet and talk to a lot of people. I have some investors that are cash flowing $25,000 a month.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's profit. So
correct.
Just everybody out there think about it this way, regardless of how long that takes or how long it took. If you're cash flowing $25,000 a month, you're making $300,000 a year. What job do you need?
No, exactly.
That's more than enough for sustainable income.
Facts.
But also it's providing income that now you can turn and flip into more, and buying more units, more doors, making sure that you have and we'll probably have to do a whole episode on amassing a large portfolio and how you manage those, making sure that you have an entire team in place, because it's one thing to manage 1, 2, 3 properties on your own and be a landlord and handle those things. But once you get up in that 10, 20, 30, 50, 100,
you got to get a property management.
You've got to have a team that you trust that's going to take the stress off your shoulders. It's worth a little bit, but also the more that you have, the more you can negotiate on the fees that you're having to pay. So lots of different ways to jump on that and make money. But when it comes to house hacking, whether it's multifamily, single family, it is the easiest way versus paying rent. I went and spoke to the basketball team at Milwaukee and was educating them on how they could use their cost of living check, which is something that a lot of athletes are getting. But it could be something, maybe you have parents that are giving an allotment to a student in college that, hey, we'll pay this much a month. Well, let's use that money to buy a property. Then you can rent it out. You can rent out the other rooms to your friends, classmates, teammates, things like that. Now you're becoming an investor off the top, and using those funds, using that money and showing the leases that you can get signed by those people is an easy way to do it while you're in college without a job.
Right.
That income that you're bringing in from those other doors, that shows as income. So it's an easy opportunity for young people, old people, all walks of life to really get in and start making money quickly. As you talk about investment properties, we start talking about long-term rentals. basically being a landlord, having somebody in a property for at least 6 months. Tell me your experience with long-term rentals, what you like about them, what you don't like about them, and then why are they an advantage over something else?
So I think long-term rentals are solid because, one, it mitigates your risk. Like if people aren't, one, you don't have to have a lot of money to jump in the long-term rental game. The caveat to that is that if you jump in the game and just become a homeowner, a lot of people will stop there. But you can keep going with minimal amount of money, which is a good point too. It's like you have double income. Like say if you have a wife, husband, y'all can jump in the game as well. It's like it's divide and conquer. Ironically enough, I'm actually closing a house tomorrow. I had a husband and wife. They bought 2 separate homes. And now like they both sold it, combining their money, and now they're buying a much larger house and investing in businesses and things of that nature. So that's another benefit of dividing and conquering within a relationship for real estate portfolio. Some of the advantages too is that you can build a significant real estate portfolio with a minimal amount of money. I'll give you an example of mine. I hardly hear from one of my tenants, right? You just put a home warranty on the house, $600 a year. If anything goes wrong, they call the home warranty company. You pay a service fee. And you can still have a 9 to 5 and manage multiple properties.
Right.
And people think, oh, I don't want to be a landlord. It's not that hard, right? It's not that hard. Like that one house, like eventually I want to give that to my daughter. It'll be paid off by the time she's ready for college. She could, if she stays in town, she can rent out that house to her friends, and pay me rent, until she can get ready for it. But I mean, that would be the game plan. And by then, a house may be $500,000 with a quick $200,000 investment. People can get approved for that too, right? But I would say the most benefits is you can create a substantial real estate portfolio without having to leverage a ton of risk and a ton of your money. And then the short-term game, that's where it's different. Now, you've leveraged some loans for DSCRs and things of that nature.
Yeah, I've done a couple of different things. And I'll say this on long-term rentals. You also have the tax advantages. And
correct.
We'll have an episode dedicated to real estate tax and avoiding those taxes and using different scenarios to make sure that you're not paying tax. But you get depreciation on investment property. So when you have a rental, you're able to deduct something from the income that you're bringing in on those taxes. So you're not paying tax on the money that you're making from the long-term rental.
Right, and repairs.
Yeah, repairs. There's so many different kinds of write-offs where you can make sure that you're protecting yourself on the backside. Now, as it pertains to short-term rentals, which are kind of, it's the new rage, it's Airbnb, it's, I use all these different strategies and different areas that you want to invest in. It does require a significant amount of money down, but you can also there's so many strategies to use other people's money for that. But if you're just going about it like, hey, I want to buy a short-term rental, you're probably gonna put in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% down. There used to be a caveat where you could buy a second home with only 10% down, and you could rent it out a certain amount, and then if your priorities changed over time, you could make that a short-term rental and go that route. There's 2 different types of loans, whether you're doing a personal loan as an investment. You can also do a commercial loan, which is great, and that's typically 25% down. So you've got to have, some funds for that. But the advantage of short-term rental is that you are bringing in a ton more money. Yeah. So, if you have a house that, let's use a house in Nashville. If you have a 3 or 4 bedroom house in Nashville, remotely close to downtown, as far as a long-term rental, like you can maybe get $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month. Yeah. But as a short-term rental, it may do $2,500 to $3,000 a week.
Correct.
And you're paying a higher price because it's going to have to be zoned. And Nashville is a touchy subject with Airbnbs because it's ever changing legislation. Right. It's hard to keep track of. They start to change rules and they go back on them.
They changed the tax rules today, actually.
Today. It's so hard to stay on top of that.
Ali sent me that.
It makes it tough.
Yeah.
So you have to be on top of the game when it comes to short-term rentals in places that have restrictions. That's a very a very important thing is to make sure that you're in a place that either doesn't have restrictions or that you understand those restrictions very well.
And also understanding margins too, because one of my guys that invests solely in Airbnbs, the best way he put it was that it's you're jumping out of real estate. You're in the hospitality realm. Like, and the turnover is crazy. So you have to get you a management team, and you're managing a hotel essentially.
Right.
And it's so different. The margins sometimes don't make sense. Everybody will hit me up and say, man, I want an STR, I want an STR, I want an STR, I want an Airbnb. And then when I present them numbers and margins, they're like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I if you don't have the capital, like, I think LTR would probably be the best for a novice investor. But you're running by the time you get to Airbnb.
Right.
You're running. You gotta walk and crawl before you jump into the Airbnb.
Well, I would say the market that you're in is extremely important.
Yeah.
If you're downtown Nashville, you're gonna make money hand over fist.
Yeah.
If you are Gulf Coast, if you're
right,
Destin, Florida, Gulf Shores, Alabama, Orange Beach, Panama City.
Because I really want to know about that. Not to cut you off. I want to know about how you jumped into the game and how you financed that. So tell them. So Josh, you own a property on a beach. How did you tell me, run through the gambit of financing for me? Like, how did you finance that? What kind of loan did it? And then how do you manage that property?
So we had to go and do a commercial loan. And I really wanted to be the guinea pig on this because I had people ask me about it all the time. You know, we want to buy on the beach here. We want to buy lake homes here.
Right. How
do we go about finding financing? So for me, I'm a big believer in, like, let's go find out. If we make some mistakes, you know, it's back to the not losing, I'm learning. But I wanted to be able to learn for the people that I know and the people who ask me questions so that I'm more educated on that.
Right.
So we went the route of getting a commercial loan because what we did, the commercial loan allowed us to go through a DSCR type setup to where DSCR is debt service coverage ratio. Different lenders who participate in DSCRs will give you different ratios that you need. Some of them are 1-to-1, which means as long as the rental projections, and on a long-term rental, as long as the lease is set up to make at least as much money as the mortgage is, then you're approved for the loan.
So hold on, let me ask a question. The approval is based on the equity, essentially.
Well, the approval is based on your mortgage matching up with what you're bringing in.
Okay.
So if you say, hey, I have a lease for $1,400 and the mortgage on this property is going to be $1,400, you're approved for the loan.
Gotcha. But credit still has to be there.
Your credit has to be there
for everybody.
You can put down 10% usually is what you can do on that. You don't have to go as far as buying an investment property, but you can use the equity. So once it gets appraised,
right,
you're using where that is. You put 10% down on what you're paying for it, and then the equity comes back and fills in the gap on that.
Gotcha.
So what we were able to do, we used equity from another property, pulled that, used that to make a larger down payment so that we could kind of clear some of those hurdles. And we had a third party come and do a rental assessment. Because it's in a condo building.
How much was that?
How much was the
rental assessment? Yeah. Is that an appraisal or did the management company?
It was essentially an appraisal. The mortgage company ran it. So they worked it into the loan, but as a lender fee, but it wasn't something we had to go out and pay for immediately on our own.
Okay.
But when they put those numbers out there, it showed that, you know, even paying a 20% management fee, there was going to be substantial amount of margin so that we would be able to make money and profit. And so as soon as they saw that, approved us for the loan.
Nice.
You're ready to go. As far as the management piece, we manage it ourselves. And so that was, again.
So you manage a property
in Florida.
In Florida. How? Like, do you have a cleaning day? Run me through that, because that would be terrifying to me. I would want to be hands off because I don't know how you would manage that. Explain that process.
Well, so a lot of people are very hands off. They don't want the problems, but that's also where they're losing money.
Okay.
So my strategy was twofold. I wanted to capture as much money as possible. But again, I wanted to learn and have this experience so that I could use that experience to educate people who were trying to do it as well. I want to build that trust. I want to add that value. So when people start asking questions, instead of saying like, man, I don't know, buy this property.
Right.
Let me know when you figure it out.
Right.
I can walk them through the steps.
Yeah.
I can walk them through the different areas on the Gulf Coast and talk about the positives, negatives, things like that. But for us, like, I was renting it out. We've been going to this area for 20 years. Okay. So we had an understanding of what that area brought in. We knew the buildings that we wanted to be in. We asked enough questions to know that we needed to make sure we had a strong HOA. There was a building in the same town that we knew to stay away from because of HOA research. They just got hit with I believe a $60 million assessment based on the structure of the building. What an assessment is when a large building says, hey, we're going to do this renovation or this upgrade, and then that is split amongst all of the owners. And so, $60 million, regardless of how many 800 owners or whatever they have,
that's insane. That's
a lot of money that people are having to come out of pocket. So That's in litigation and coming out, but that's neither here nor there. It's just making sure that you're vetting all the different things. Now, when it comes to a management company, there are a lot of tools out there, a lot of automation tools where, we can control the locks on the door from here. I can change the code for people. I can control my thermostat, a lot of the things that we have access to our homes.
Right.
Personally.
You do all of that from Nashville.
Correct.
That's correct. What about cleaning? Like, how do you clean your...
So, again, it's back to asking questions. I get on, like, the ownership had a Facebook group. So I'm asking questions. Hey, I'm a new owner, live near Nashville, would love to speak with somebody who's done this before, anybody who's managing on their own. Can you give me some cleaner ideas? Can you give me some handyman? Can you give me a plumber? Can you give me all this? And so it's forming those relationships, kind of like we talked about before. When you are trying to learn something, you got to ask a lot of questions.
Right.
Don't worry about asking bad questions, dumb questions. You just need to get information.
Right.
And then also show them that you can bring some value to them. Like, hey, I would love to work with you. If my place is booked and people are asking me, I'd love to send you a referral.
Right.
So doing that, but what we're saving is 20%
monthly.
Well, 20% annually. Basically, most management companies are going to take 20% off your gross. So if you have a place,
and this is for STR,
correct,
or
well, that area, like the Gulf Coast rental,
that location, right?
Yeah. So they're paying 20%. So if you rent out gross on, say, $60,000, which is not uncommon at the beach, $60,000 a year comes in. The management company's taking $12,000 off the top. Now they're also going to take out 13% for taxes. They're also going to take out all the cleaning, and then you're going to pay tax on what you made. So realistically, you're probably only getting about 60% of what you bring in. So on $60,000, 60% of that would be $36,000. So I want that extra 12.
Right.
That's important to me when I know that I can control everything with a click of a button.
Right.
So you can set up those different automations. It's very important that you start to build that rapport with the people who are staying there, so you have repeat visitors. It's not that hard. The same people call you back and say, "Is that same date available? We need a week. We need that week every year," and it's just clockwork. So it turns over. It's an easy, profitable business, but it's like running another business. So it's been successful for us. Something we are excited about trying to do more of.
Right. And you leveraged money from real estate to buy more real estate.
Correct.
Which is a key component.
And here's a really interesting aspect of short-term rentals. You can do something called a cost segregation study. Okay. Now, what that does...
Explain to them what that is, because that's a really good piece.
So with any rental, you have the depreciation aspect that we talked about. Mm-hmm. But with commercial properties or short-term rentals, they allow you to do what's called a cost segregation study. And what they do is they go in and assess different aspects of that property. So instead of saying that everything depreciates over 27 and a half years or 39 and a half years, now it's going to say maybe the driveway is going to depreciate over 5 years. It's the furniture is going to depreciate over 3 years. The structure of the home is going to be 20 years. And they go and do the math for you, and then they allow you to accelerate that depreciation. So what you can do is, and a lot of times, I'm going to generalize here. This is not by no means use this as church, but like from 20 to 30% sometimes can be your immediate tax write-off on the purchase price. So on a property that's $500,000, you can write off $100,000 of your income. Now, here's why you manage your own property. As long as you're logging 500 hours or you can show that you're managing the property yourself, you now qualify as a real estate expert. Once you qualify as a real estate expert, you can write that off of your income. But if you're able to write off all of your income, you can now write off your spouse's W-2 income. And so you're not having to push those forward. So here's just a sample strategy that some people use. If I'm able to write off $100,000 of taxes, and I normally would have paid $25,000, okay, in that scenario, you can be disciplined enough to take that $25,000 and go use that as an investment for your next property on a short-term rental. Now, once you do that, now you create another cost segregation study to where you create more tax write-offs for next year.
Right.
And now you're writing off all the income that you made from the short-term rental. You can write off your personal income. And then if all of your write-offs exceed your personal income, you write off your spouse's income, and now you're getting money back. And so there's just different ways that you're avoiding taxes. You're making sure that you are taking the money that you're saving, and now you're creating another loophole for the future, and it just snowballs. And it
That's beautiful.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
You know, we need to have Big Mike come on and talk about some of the things he's done with cost segregation and commercial properties. And
shout out to Big Mike. Actually, he would be a really good guest.
Amazing guest.
We may fly out there and do it from his ranch.
We could. Was it Black Ranch, Blackstone, something?
Blackstone, something in Chester.
I don't know. That's
shout out to Big Mike.
You start naming ranches once you get a lot of money.
Yeah, right. Don't tell him he got 600 acres either. He got 700 of them joints.
It was a whole city.
Right.
All right, we've got a lot of information that we need to cover, and we've gotten so far into the details. Let's take a break. We're gonna have to split this into 2 separate episodes. We'll do a part 1 and a part 2, but I don't want to shortchange anybody on the information. So we'll cut this here. Our week 3 will be part 2 of episode 2, and then we'll continue from there.
Yep, let's get it.
Anything is possible. Yeah. Trying to get a lot of dough and dirt through all the obstacles, cause anything is possible. Hey. Oh man, I got a lot of goals. Stack that bread and buy my nose. Anything is possible. Hey. I grind to get a lot of dough and dirt through all the obstacles.